This story is titled, Fiancé Pretended to Cheat on Me as a Prank, so I took back the ring and walked away. Guys, before we start the video, I just saw something crazy. 82% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. If you're already here enjoying the content, why not hit that subscribe button? It's completely free, takes just a second, and it really helps the channel grow so I can keep bringing you more stories you love. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, I've been with Emma, 26 female, for just over 3 years now. Things were good, or at least I thought they were. We'd talked about marriage a couple of times over the years, so I knew she was on the same page as me. After saving up for months, I decided it was finally time to propose. I wanted to make it special, something she'd always remember. I planned the whole thing down to the smallest detail. First, I booked a resort by the lake. It wasn't just any resort. It was one of those places you see in Instagram travel posts, with private cabins, a gorgeous view, and a setup for fancy dinners by the water. I spent a good chunk of my savings on it, but it felt worth it. I was proposing to the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. Go big or go home, right? The ring was another big deal. Emma and I had talked about it before, and she mentioned how she always imagined a diamond solitaire. Nothing too over the top, she'd said. Just elegant. So, I spent weeks hunting for the perfect ring. When I found it, I knew it was the one, just like I thought she was the one for me. I showed the ring to my mom, and she actually teared up. My mom's always been the sentimental type. She said, Michael, this is perfect. She's going to love it. My dad, on the other hand, thought I was crazy for spending so much money. Son, are you sure about this? Marriage isn't all sunsets and diamond rings, you know. Classic dad advice. The proposal itself went perfectly. I had planned a private dinner by the water at sunset. There were fairy lights, soft music playing in the background, and the lake shimmering in the last light of the day. I was so nervous. My hands were shaking when I pulled out the ring. But when I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said yes. I don't think I've ever felt that happy in my entire life. For a moment, it felt like everything was perfect. Afterward, Emma was over the moon. She couldn't stop talking about how perfect the proposal was and how happy she was. She called her parents as soon as we got back to the cabin. Her mom cried on the phone saying, We're so happy for you two. Michael, welcome to the family. That really meant a lot to me. Her dad, who's normally a quiet guy, even told me, You did good, son. It felt like the start of something amazing. The first few weeks after the proposal were incredible. Emma was so excited to show off her ring to everyone. She'd stop random people, like the cashier at the grocery store, and go, Look at this. Isn't it gorgeous? My fiancé picked it out for me. And honestly, I didn't mind. It felt good seeing how happy she was. I was proud that I could make her that happy. Our families were equally excited. My mom couldn't stop calling me to ask about wedding plans. She's a total planner, so this kind of thing is right up her alley. Have you picked a venue yet? What colors are you thinking? Oh, are you going to do a buffet or plated dinner? She was basically ready to take over as our wedding coordinator. My dad, being my dad, said, Don't let your mother steamroll you. Remember, it's your wedding, not hers. Emma's family was just as into it. Her mom started calling her the bride-to-be, and her little brother joked about how he finally got to be the cool uncle someday. Everything seemed perfect at first, but then Emma started acting different. At first, it was subtle. She started hanging out with her friends a lot more. She told me it was because she wouldn't have as much time to see them after we were married, so she wanted to make the most of it now. That made sense, and I didn't want to be the guy who stopped her from having fun with her friends. Besides, her friends are nice people, and I trusted her. But then, little things started to bother me. Emma has always had a quirky sense of humor, but after the proposal, her jokes started to get a little off. She'd make comments like, Oh, I've got Michael trained so well. He'll do anything I ask. She said it in front of her friends a few times, and while they laughed, it made me feel weird. I brushed it off at first because I didn't want to seem overly sensitive. I thought maybe it was just her way of handling the stress of planning a wedding. One night, we were at her parents' house for dinner. It was one of those big family meals where everyone's sitting around the table, laughing and talking. After dinner, I offered to help clean up, and Emma said, See, I've trained him well. Her dad actually frowned and said, Emma, don't say that. That's not nice. I laughed awkwardly because I didn't want to make a scene, but I could tell her dad didn't like it either. The comments didn't stop, though. In fact, they got worse when we were out with her friends. She'd flirt with her guy friends as a joke, saying stuff like, If I wasn't engaged, I'd totally date you, and then look at me like I was supposed to laugh along. It was humiliating, but I didn't want to start an argument in front of everyone. Her friends even told her to stop a couple of times. One of them said, "Emma, that's not funny. You're being kind of rude." But she'd just shrug it off and say, "Relax, it's just a joke." I brought it up with her once. I told her, "Some of the things you say in front of your friends make me uncomfortable. Can you not do that?" She rolled her eyes and said, "Michael, you need to learn to take a joke. You're way too serious." I dropped it because I didn't want to turn it into a big fight, but it kept bothering me. If I'm honest, I think I was trying to convince myself it wasn't a big deal when, deep down, it was. Looking back now, I wish I had said something sooner. Maybe it wouldn't have changed anything, but at least I wouldn't have let it fester. At the time, I kept telling myself that this was just a phase, that she was stressed about the wedding, or nervous about the future. But the truth is, the woman I proposed to was starting to feel like a stranger, and I didn't know what to do about it. After the proposal, things between Emma and me were still good, for the most part, but I started noticing some changes in her behavior. She told me she wanted to spend more time with her friends before the wedding because, as she put it, things are going to change after we're married. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, I wasn't going to be the guy who stopped her from seeing her friends. Plus, her friends were pretty chill, and I trusted her. But the way she acted when she was with them started to bother me. It started small, with her making little jokes about me. Stuff like calling me her manslave in front of her friends. She'd laugh and say, "Oh, don't worry, Michael will handle it. He always does." At first, I tried to laugh along because I didn't want to seem like I couldn't take a joke. But the more she said it, the more it stung. Her friends didn't even seem to think it was that funny. Sometimes they'd awkwardly laugh, but I could tell they were uncomfortable too. One time, we were out with her friends at this bar downtown. Everything was going fine until she started flirting with one of her guy friends, David. She kept jokingly saying, "David, if I wasn't engaged, I'd totally be dating you right now." She even winked at him. David looked embarrassed and said, Emma, stop. That's not cool." But she just laughed and said, "Relax, it's a joke." I didn't say anything at the time because I didn't want to make a scene, but it really got under my skin. I brought it up with her later that night when we got home. I said, "Emma, some of the things you say in front of your friends make me uncomfortable. Like tonight, when you were flirting with David. That wasn't okay." She rolled her eyes and said, "Michael, you need to learn how to take a joke. You're way too serious all the time." I tried to explain that it wasn't about being serious. It was about respect. But she wasn't having it. She brushed me off and said I was overreacting. I let it go because I didn't want to start a big fight, but it kept eating at me. It wasn't just with her friends either. She started making those same kinds of comments around our families. One night, we were having dinner at her parents' house. It was a pretty casual thing, just her parents, her little brother, and us. After dinner, I offered to help clean up, and Emma goes, "See? I've got him trained already." Her dad gave her a look and said, "Emma, don't talk like that. It's not nice." Her mom laughed nervously and said, "She's just joking." But I could tell her dad wasn't amused, and honestly, neither was I. The jokes kept escalating. She started calling me hubby in this sarcastic tone when we were around people. Like, she'd ask me to grab her a drink and say, "Thanks, hubby. You're the best." It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Like she was mocking me. I felt like I was becoming the punchline to all her jokes. My sister Sarah noticed it too. She pulled me aside at a family BBQ and said, "Hey, are you okay? Emma's been kind of off lately." I didn't know what to say. I just shrugged and said, "She's stressed about the wedding, I think." But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Then came the camping trip. Emma's family loves camping, and they'd invited us to join them for a weekend trip. My parents and sister came too, so it felt like a good chance for our families to bond. Everything was great at first. We set up the tents, cooked dinner over the fire, and told stories. It was one of those nights where you feel like everything in life is simple and perfect. And then Emma ruined it. Out of nowhere, while we were all sitting around the campfire, she says, "You know, I have to hand it to Michael. He forgave me for cheating and even proposed after it." The whole group went silent. I stared at her, completely stunned, while my mom's face turned white. My dad, who'd been poking the fire with a stick, froze. My sister whispered, "What did she just say?" I couldn't even process it. I asked her, "When did you cheat?" She smirked and said, "Oh, you know, a few days before we went to the resort. How could you forget?" It was so memorable for me. A couple of her friends laughed nervously, probably thinking it was some inside joke. But my family wasn't laughing. My mom looked like she was about to cry, and my dad just shook his head. Before I could say anything, Emma burst out laughing and said, "Relax! It's a joke. You're all so uptight." My dad stood up and said, "Emma, that's not funny." My mom quietly got up and went back to the tent. I just sat there, frozen, while everyone else awkwardly tried to change the subject. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying what she said in my head. Was this who Emma really was? Someone who thought it was funny to humiliate me in front of our families and friends? I didn't even confront her about it then, because I didn't trust myself not to explode. When we got home the next day, she acted like nothing had happened. She even joked, "You're so quiet, babe. What's wrong? Did you forget how to take a joke?" That was it for me. I didn't say anything, but I started seriously questioning whether this was someone I could spend the rest of my life with. I knew I had to make a decision, but I wasn't ready to face it yet. I kept telling myself that maybe this was just a phase, that she was nervous about the wedding, or stressed about the future. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The woman I proposed to wasn't the woman sitting across from me anymore, and I didn't know if I could fix it, or if I even wanted to. After the camping trip, I knew things weren't right between me and Emma. That night around the campfire replayed in my head over and over. The way she casually joked about cheating, like it was the funniest thing in the world, completely threw me. I'd never felt so humiliated in my life, especially in front of my family. My mom's devastated face, my dad's disappointed silence, and even my sister's whispered, "Are you okay?" were burned into my memory. But the worst part? Emma didn't seem to care at all. When we got home, I was still fuming. I was waiting for her to say something, an apology, an acknowledgement, anything, but she acted like nothing happened. She threw her bag on the couch, took off her engagement ring, and set it on the table like it was just another day. Then she went to take a shower. That was it. No. "Hey, I think I took that joke too far." Or even a simple, "Are you okay?" I sat there staring at the ring. I had spent months saving for that thing, carefully picking it out, planning the proposal, and imagining our future together. And now it just felt like a cheap piece of jewelry sitting on a table. The love and excitement I had felt when she first put it on her finger were completely gone. When she came out of the shower, I decided to test the waters. I said, "Hey, about what you said at the campfire last night." Before I could finish, she rolled her eyes and said, "Oh my God, Michael, are you seriously still upset about that? It was just a joke. You really need to lighten up." That hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been humiliated in front of both our families, and she couldn't even take it seriously. I said, "It wasn't funny, Emma. You made me look like a complete idiot." She shrugged and said, "You're overreacting. Everyone knew it was a joke." Then she grabbed her phone and walked into the bedroom, leaving me sitting there with my blood boiling. I couldn't do it anymore. I realized that this wasn't just about one bad joke. This was about respect. And Emma clearly didn't respect me. How was I supposed to marry someone who thought it was okay to make me the butt of every joke? Someone who couldn't even apologize when she knew she'd hurt me? I'd spent weeks brushing off her comments, trying to convince myself it wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal. It was a huge deal. So I made a decision. While she was in the bedroom scrolling through her phone, I grabbed the engagement ring off the table, packed a bag, and left. I went to crash at my friend Jake's place. Jake's the kind of guy who's always been there for me, no matter what. When I showed up at his door with a duffel bag and a pissed-off look on my face, he didn't even ask questions. He just said, "Come in. Beer or coffee?" Later that night, I texted Emma. I told her the wedding was off and that I needed time to think about our relationship. I tried to keep it as calm and respectful as possible, but I didn't sugarcoat it either. I told her that what she did was unacceptable, and that I couldn't marry someone who didn't respect me. Her response came almost immediately. "Michael, you're seriously ending our engagement over a joke? You're being way too sensitive." I stared at the message, completely baffled. Sensitive? I wasn't being sensitive. I was standing up for myself. I replied, "Jokes have limits, Emma. What you said wasn't funny. It was hurtful, and you embarrassed me in front of everyone." She didn't respond right away, but when she finally did, it wasn't an apology. Instead, she wrote, "So what? Are you breaking up with me? Or are you just mad and being dramatic?" I didn't have the energy to argue with her anymore, so I just put my phone down and tried to focus on the TV. Jake, sitting next to me, finally asked, "All right, man, what's going on?" I told him everything, from the little jokes she'd been making to the campfire incident. Jake, who's usually the most laid-back guy in the world, shook his head and said, "Dude, that's messed up. If she can't see why you're upset, that's a red flag. You deserve better." The next morning, Emma called. I was half asleep when I answered, and she started yelling immediately. "Where's my ring, Michael? You had no right to take it. It's mine." I couldn't help but laugh. "Emma, the ring was a symbol of my love and our future together. Since both of those are now in question, it's not yours anymore. She didn't like that answer. You're such a cheapskate, she spat. What kind of man takes back an engagement ring? I was done being nice. The kind of man who realizes he made a mistake proposing to someone who doesn't respect him, I shot back. She hung up after that, but I knew this wasn't the end of it. After calling off the wedding, I thought things might settle down, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Emma wasn't letting this go without a fight. Not a respectful adult conversation kind of fight, but a full-blown public drama explosion. What I didn't expect was how quickly she'd weaponize social media to turn this into a circus. The day after I moved out, I woke up to dozens of texts from mutual friends and family members. My sister Sarah sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post Emma made that morning. It was a long, dramatic essay where she painted herself as the victim of my unreasonable behavior. The post read something like, "I can't believe I'm having to go through this. My fiancé, who I thought loved me, took back the engagement ring and called off our wedding because I made one joke. He's so insecure and sensitive that he can't handle a strong, confident woman. I guess it's better I found out now, rather than after marrying him." Underneath, there were dozens of comments from her friends hyping her up. "You deserve better, Queen. Good riddance to that loser. And if he can't take a joke, he's not man enough for you." It was infuriating. She had twisted the story into something it wasn't, and now I looked like the bad guy to half of our social circle. The Facebook post was bad enough, but then her mom called me. Her tone was calm at first, but I could tell she wasn't happy. "Michael, I just want to understand what happened," she said. "Emma told us you called off the wedding because she made a silly joke. I don't want to take sides, but don't you think this is all a bit extreme?" I took a deep breath and explained the situation to her. I told her it wasn't about one joke. It was about months of disrespect, the constant humiliation, and how the campfire incident was the final straw. Her mom listened quietly, but I could tell she didn't really get it. She kept saying things like, "You know how Emma is, Michael. She has a playful sense of humor. She didn't mean any harm." Finally, I said, "With all due respect, Mrs. Taylor, this isn't about her sense of humor. It's about the fact that she doesn't respect me or our relationship. I can't marry someone who treats me like a joke." That seemed to shut her down, but not for long. A few hours later, Emma's dad called. He was much more blunt. "Michael, I don't know what's going on between you and Emma, but you need to make this right. She's devastated, and this is all starting to look really bad for both of you. Just apologize and work it out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Work it out?" I said. "Did she tell you what she said in front of everyone at the campfire? Did she mention how she's been disrespecting me for months?" He sighed and said, "She said it was a joke, Michael. You're blowing this out of proportion." That was the moment I realized Emma had probably been feeding her family a very different version of events. I told him, "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to apologize for standing up for myself. This isn't something I can just sweep under the rug." Emma wasn't satisfied with dragging me on Facebook. She started reaching out to mutual friends, trying to turn them against me. A couple of my close friends, like Jake, saw right through it and had my back. But some of the more casual friends we shared started messaging me, asking, "What's going on, man? Emma says you flipped out over nothing." I didn't want to get into a back and forth with her through our friends, so I kept my explanation short and to the point. I called off the wedding because of repeated disrespect. That's all there is to it. Most people left it at that, but a few tried to play peacemaker. "Dude, are you sure you don't want to just talk things out? Maybe you guys can fix this." The truth was, I had already made up my mind. The relationship was broken, and no amount of talking it out was going to change the fact that I didn't trust Emma anymore. I couldn't marry someone who thought it was okay to humiliate me in front of our friends and family, and then double down on it when I tried to express how hurt I was. Of course, Emma wasn't done yet. A few days later, she texted me about the engagement ring again. This time, she wasn't just angry, she was threatening legal action. "You can't just take the ring, Michael," she wrote. "It's legally mine. If you don't give it back, I'll have to get a lawyer involved." I couldn't help but laugh when I read that. Legally hers? That's not how engagement rings work. I replied, "The ring was a symbol of our engagement. Since the engagement is off, the ring is no longer yours. Feel free to consult a lawyer if you want." That seemed to push her over the edge. She went back to social media, posting another update about how I stole the ring and how she was going to fight for what's rightfully hers. By this point, I had blocked her on everything, but Sarah kept me updated. "She's seriously unhinged," Sarah said, sending me yet another screenshot. This one was a long rant about how I was financially abusive for taking back the ring. Financially abusive? I couldn't believe it. Through all of this, my family was my rock. My mom called me every day to check in and remind me I was doing the right thing. Michael, you deserve someone who lifts you up, not someone who tears you down, she said. My dad, who's not the most emotional guy, even told me, you made a tough call, but it was the right one. Marriage is about respect, and it sounds like Emma doesn't understand that. Even my sister, who had always been a little skeptical of Emma, was supportive. Honestly, I'm glad this happened now and not after the wedding. Imagine dealing with this kind of behavior for the rest of your life. Hearing that from the people closest to me made all the difference. It reminded me that I wasn't crazy or overreacting. I was standing up for myself, and that's something I shouldn't feel guilty about. By the end of the week, I felt more confident in my decision than ever, but it still hurt. This was the woman I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. I had envisioned a future with her. Marriage, kids, growing old together, and now all of that was gone. It's hard to let go of something you've invested so much time and love into, even when you know it's for the best. Emma, meanwhile, kept escalating. I heard from mutual friends that she was planning to expose me with some made-up story about how I mistreated her during our relationship. At this point, I was done caring. Let her say whatever she wants. I knew the truth, and so did the people who mattered most to me. By the time the second week after the breakup rolled around, I thought Emma would have calmed down. Instead, she decided to double down on her campaign to make me the villain. I had already blocked her on every platform, but that didn't stop her from finding new ways to escalate. Between her social media posts, her family's constant attempts to guilt me into working things out, and her increasingly wild accusations, I realized there was no way to leave this quietly. It started with her trying to contact my parents. One night, my mom called me sounding really upset. Michael, Emma called me today, she said. She was crying and saying you're being unfair, that she didn't mean to hurt you, and that you're ruining both your lives by calling off the wedding. I sighed and rubbed my temples. What did you say? I told her that this is your decision to make, and that I support you, my mom replied. But Michael, she was very insistent. She kept saying you're overreacting, that it was just a joke, and that you need to stop letting your pride get in the way. She's trying to manipulate you, Mom, I said. She knows I won't back down, so now she's going through you to make me feel guilty. My mom agreed, but I could tell the whole thing bothered her. Emma had always been good at playing the victim, and even though my mom supported me, I knew Emma's sob story had gotten to her. Emma didn't stop with my mom. She called my dad next. Now, my dad is the last person on earth who would fall for Emma's antics. He's a no-nonsense guy, and he's never been one to sugarcoat things. When he called me, he sounded more annoyed than anything. Michael, that girl called me today, he said. She was crying about the ring and the wedding being off. I told her, Emma, if Michael decided to end things, he had his reasons, and I'm not getting involved. Thanks, Dad, I said, relieved. What did she say after that? She started going on about how she didn't mean it, that you're too sensitive, and that she's heartbroken. I told her, Emma, you're barking up the wrong tree. You disrespected my son, and I don't blame him for walking away. That shut her up pretty quick. Hearing that made me feel better, but I hated that she was trying to drag my family into this. It was bad enough she had turned half of our mutual friends against me, but now she was using my own parents to guilt me into taking her back. Now, before we jump into the final update, I just want to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It helps the channel a ton, and lets us keep bringing you more amazing stories. Alright, let's get to the final update. Final update. A mutual friend, Laura, reached out to me and said, Hey Michael, I thought you should know Emma's been telling people you were controlling and jealous during your relationship. What? I said, completely floored. Where is this coming from? She's saying you didn't let her hang out with her friends or talk to other guys, Laura explained. I know it's not true. I've seen how much freedom you gave her, but I wanted you to know what she's saying. I was furious but not entirely surprised. Emma had always been good at spinning stories to make herself look innocent. I figured this was her way of justifying the breakup to people who didn't know the full story. Still, it hurt. I had gone out of my way to give her space and support her friendships, even when her behavior started crossing boundaries. For her to turn around and call me controlling was a slap in the face. Jake, my best friend, stepped in at that point. He started posting little snippets of the truth in response to Emma's rants on social media. Nothing aggressive, just subtle reminders that there were two sides to every story. For example, when Emma posted about how I stole her ring, Jake commented, Actually, engagement rings are considered conditional gifts. If the engagement is broken, the ring goes back to the giver. Just saying. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make people pause and question Emma's narrative. A week later, Emma showed up at Jake's place unannounced. I was staying there temporarily while I sorted everything out, and I guess she figured out where I was. She knocked on the door, and when I opened it, she immediately started crying. "Michael, please," she said, her voice shaking. "Can we talk? Just for a few minutes?" Jake, who had been sitting on the couch, gave me a look like, "Do you want me to kick her out?" I shook my head. As much as I didn't want to talk to her, I figured this might be the only way to get her to stop. We sat down at the kitchen table, and Emma launched into a long, emotional speech about how much she loved me, how sorry she was, and how she didn't realize her jokes had hurt me so much. "I was just trying to make people laugh," she said. "I didn't mean to disrespect you. You know I'd never actually cheat on you." I let her talk for a while, but when she started blaming me for overreacting again, I cut her off. "Emma, stop. You keep saying it was just a joke, but jokes have limits. You crossed the line, and instead of apologizing, you doubled down and acted like I was the problem. How can I marry someone who doesn't respect me?" Her tears dried up pretty quickly after that. She sniffed and said, "So that's it? You're just throwing away 3 years over one bad joke?" "It's not just one joke, Emma," I said. "It's the pattern of disrespect, the constant humiliation, and the fact that you've shown me time and time again that you don't take me or our relationship seriously. I can't do this anymore." She stared at me for a moment, then stood up and said, "Fine. If that's how you feel, then I guess I wasted 3 years of my life." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Jake looked at me and said, "Well, that was something. You okay?" "Yeah," I said, surprisingly calm. "I'm done. Since that final confrontation, I've started to feel like myself again. Cutting Emma out of my life was the best decision I've ever made, even if it was painful at first. My family has been incredibly supportive, and I've realized who my true friends are. Some of the people who took Emma's side have started to reach out, saying they didn't know the full story. I haven't decided if I want to bother reconnecting with them yet. For now, I'm just focused on moving forward. Emma, as far as I know, is still telling her version of the story to anyone who will listen, but I've stopped caring. Let her say whatever she wants. I know the truth, and the people who matter to me know it too. At the end of the day, I'm just glad I found out who she really was before it was too late." So Reddit, am I the a-hole?